Hello, YouTube. Luigi here. This is going to be episode number 6 in my series called Tales of a Country Architect. And as promised to one of my viewers, Susan, we're going to talk about my mentor, Mr. Frank Edison Kennett Jr., with whom I did my internship. And I've already told you Frank was a brilliant architect and a detailing genius. And I'm not going to go over that again because it's still true. He was also a great friend. And on his 70th birthday, I gave a little toast speech for him where I said he was more than a father. And there's something to that, and maybe we'll talk more about that later. Frank, I always thought Frank was a past president of NCARB, the National Council of Architects Registration Board. And whenever Frank said architect, and he had that upper crust accent, whenever he said that, you could just hear he was always saying it with a capital A, because the profession meant so much to him, and anyone who had qualified as an architect automatically, in his mind, was deserving of a certain level of esteem. Frank was very involved in NCARB, but it wasn't a past national president. I went online and tried to verify that. There were regional NCARB districts, and Frank was a regional director. He was a director of the New England region, and I don't know how many years he was director, because the national president only serves a 12-month term. But the years, or the year, seemed like forever, that Frank was involved with NCARB. He totally threw himself at this. Frank was an exponent and a pillar of the profession of architecture. And he just totally immersed himself in this position of being a regional director. And I'm going to say this, he did it to the neglect of his practice. I mean, this is how important this was. He was gone a lot on these junkets and things and speaking engagements, and when the ARE, the Architect's Registration Exam, needed to be graded, the candidates' design exams would come to Frank's office because he had miles of tax space. They were pinned up, and the other jurors would come in, and these are graded. Pass or fail. There's no numerical grade. It's either a pass or fail. It's a design exam. And the jurors are not supposed to confer with each other. One juror is not to influence the decision of another. That's not to say that we lowly peons who were working in the office did not observe that happening, but it wasn't supposed to. So for all this great dedication Frank had to NCARB, all the unpaid, selfless hours of devotional service he gave to the profession, for some reason, Frank had no love of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. Frank, he called them a bunch of stuffed shirts. Honest to God. Not only did he call them a bunch of stuffed shirts, he was also known to say, the AIA is nothing but a glorified trade union. And yet, here's the dichotomy. None of us are without contradictions in our life. And yet, near the end of his career, he had applied, and I think more than once, to the AIA to have FAIA status. The F in front of AIA meant you were a fellow of the AIA. And so it was a very important distinction. It's prestigious to many. It meant something, obviously meant something to Frank. Frank was always denied this FAIA status. Well, he was never even a member of the AIA. And I know that crushed him. That just crushed him deeply, because he had spent a lifetime practicing architecture in a small town in northern New Hampshire, where I had my practice. Not down in the cities, not Nashua or Concord or Manchester, where the action is. We were up here in the boonies. And he never got it, and I know he was bitterly disappointed. Now, one night, It's in the winter. One night, the local library had a speaker scheduled to come up from downstate and speak to an audience. The library did this all the time. They staged these events to speak that night on old houses, old New England houses. Well, because of the storm, the snowstorm, this guy didn't make it. He cracked up or had a flat tire or had a baby or dropped dead. I don't know. He couldn't make it. So out of the clear blue sky, with no notice whatsoever, I get a phone call from the library saying, our speaker can't make it. We just found out. We realize this is like absolutely zero notice. Can you come in and deliver an address to our audience tonight? I said, well, what's the subject matter? And they said, it's old New England houses. I said, oh, sure, I can do that. I can do that in my sleep. I said, the only thing I'm going to need is either a chalkboard on one of the walls or a large whiteboard. And they said, okay, we'll see what we can do for you. Well, that should have raised a flag right away. Because all they had was a little easel with a little pad of newsprint. And I talk with my hands. I cannot talk without a pencil. When I'm delivering an address to a group, I like to illustrate that which I am trying to impart. But that's a minor little setback. I get to the, I try to find the best clothes I have. I go to the library, and I go to the head of the room. Obviously, I'm the speaker. And I'm sort of waiting for it to fill up and for the time to be right to start. And I notice right there, smack in the front row, is Frank Kennett and his wife, Carol Robbins Kennett, or Carol Roberts Kennett, whatever it was. Everybody in Frank's family had three names. You know, Lee Kennett Page. Everybody had three names. It's like Lee Harvey Oswald or something. You know, John Wayne Gacy. So for some reason, everybody, Frank's family members, he referred to his wife as Carol Robbins Kennett. It might have been Roberts. I never got that straight. So there they are. And it should not have surprised me. Carol, like many ladies of means and spare time, socially volunteered at the library. She was also a volunteer at the hospital. This is how people give back to the community in terms of social service. So that should not have surprised me at all. And you know, when I've told others since then that Frank was there in the audience, they all had the same question. Oh my God, weren't you scared? Weren't you nervous? Weren't you embarrassed having to give a talk in front of your former mentor? And I said, not at all. Not at all. I was delighted to see Frank there. Absolutely delighted. So I'm standing in the front of the room, this assembly room, and when it got to be time, Frank Kennett rose out of his chair. I don't know if I'm going to get through this in one piece. Frank Kennett rose out of his chair, came up to the head of the class, stood next to me, and proceeded on his own, unprompted, to give me the most glowing of introductions to this group. I was so deeply touched by this. I was so, I loved this man so much, and here he was standing up on my behalf. It meant the world to me. So Frank sat down. I deliver my spiel, taking pains to point out this is something I learned at Frank's office. For example, if you don't have a vapor barrier on your wall where the water vapor coming through the wall hits the dew point and smack in the middle of the insulation, and the vapor condenses the liquid, and your insulation turns into a sponge, and it has no thermal value anymore, and rots out your wall. Or the exact reasons why some roofs have an ice damming problem. That was another one of these things I learned from. So I was very careful and respectful. And I would have done it if Frank had been there or not, to point out these are the things, some of the things I learned at Frank's office. So I give my address, and it's over, and the people are filing out, and Frank comes up to me and says, how would you like to come over for a drambuie? Well, twist my arm, Frank. Yeah, that would be delightful. Frank had this wonderfully large 4-square house on the West Side Road. And He had a big living room and dining room, but the room I really liked the most was the front parlor. A little smaller, a little more intimate. It was just nice. But being the time of year it was, people shut up parts of their houses in the winter so they didn't have to heat them. We were not in the parlor, my favorite room. We were in the living room. And Frank poured me a drambuie, and he poured one for himself. Now, I know enough, I learned this on Kung Fu Cowboy, that the guest does not begin to eat or take a sip of anything before the host does. The host always does it first. So even though he poured me first, I just held it. And Frank sat next to me after he had poured his, and he raised his glass, and he said, "You are architect." Yeah. It meant the world to me to hear that from Frank. All right, everybody. Tales of a Country Architect, Episode 6. God bless you. I love you all. Bye.